It's the grand finale of the Champions Chess Tour. In the final, Magnus Carlsen against Wesley. So on the Friday, Magnus Carlsen won the first set of 4 games. On the Saturday, second set, Carlsen won the first game. Wesley won the second. Third game was drawn, and this is game 4. Magnus Carlsen playing white, Wesley so black. And it's a Tarrasch. Now, this line of the Tarrasch that Wesley plays, c takes d4, this has almost become the Berlin of d4. In the 1950s, this was completely discredited. It was thought that white has a clear advantage in this line. But in the last 10 years, this has been rehabilitated. And with the aid of powerful computers, it was discovered that this endgame is actually tenable for black. Wesley So has actually made a speciality of holding this endgame with black. Now it's clear that white has the advantage here. And the main line runs like this, and bishop g5. It looks unpleasant for black, but Wesley understands this position incredibly well and has made a speciality of holding this endgame. So how do you crack this d4 Tarrasch Berlin endgame? Well, it's interesting. Over 200 games have been played with knight takes e6, and this is the move that the computer recommends. But Carlsen played bishop d2. Now this has only been, according to my database, only been seen in 5 games previously, and the computer thinks this is roughly level. But the whole point is it's a bit different, and Wesley has to think for himself. So clever from Magnus, very clever opening choice. Knight d7 from Wesley. Carlsen takes the pawn in the middle. And although the computer thinks that it's roughly level, from a human point of view, it's quite clear that black still has a few problems to solve. And the biggest problem, of course, is the king in the middle. You can't castle, it splits those rooks. Yes, that is a cardinal sin. So black still has a few problems to solve with development. Whereas for white, well, it's clear you're going to be able to castle one way or the other fairly quickly. Not only that, this bishop is about to come here. Now, Wesley plays pawn to h6, and as many of you who watch this channel will know, there is a special place in hell reserved for players that play these little pawn moves at the side of the board when they should be developing. Not clear why Wesley played this actually. Remember, this is a rapid play game. 15 minutes plus, I think it was 5 seconds increment. So, you know, when you're under pressure, you've got to make decisions quickly. Often, you know, you make these half moves. I mean, h6 does stop a knight coming to g5, but, I mean, given what we see in the game, f6 followed by king e7 to f7 looks like a better choice. Anyway, h6 played. As we'll see, somewhat superfluous. Bishop c3. Now this is a beautiful square for the bishop. You often see this, well, you see it in some variations in d4 openings. Petrosian made a speciality of systems where he managed to get a bishop to c3. It's a beautiful piece. Looking down the long diagonal, but also supported by the pawn on b2. In fact, you see it quite often when black plays, for example, the Catalan. When this bishop emerges on c6, it can be a very good square. But this looks lovely. So black certainly has a few problems to solve. You know, how are you going to deal with the pressure on g7? Wesley played rook c8. Bishop d3. f6 anyway. See, that move had to come, and that renders h6 somewhat superfluous. Castles by Carlsen. So, well, I mean, compare and contrast the two positions. White's king is safe at the side of the board. the rooks are connected, ready to enter into the middle of the board. The pieces look very nicely placed. Black still has to solve the problem of the king in the middle. The rooks are split. Where does this bishop go? Absolutely not clear. So black has a few problems to solve. King e8. Yeah, it looks like that's going to be the safest spot for the king. Now one could just plonk a rook in the middle. Magnus plays a very interesting idea that it's quite an unsettling move. I mean, this is unusual. Puts the bishop on e2, so he's looking perhaps to give a disruptive check on h5. Now, if you can sort of force a pawn to g6, it could weaken the f6 pawn. So it's just keeping this one in mind. It's just a little bit unsettling for black. f4, and particularly in combination with this move. You know, you don't know whether f5 and bishop h5 check are going to come. And yes, as I said, do you really want to play g6 when it could weaken that pawn? So a tricky one to meet. In fact, the computer thinks that h5 might be the best move, but again, that's not an easy move to play when black's rook would have to keep protecting that pawn. Wesley played bishop c5 check, which is definitely a compromise because Carlsen whipped off that bishop. Yes, it does enable black to solve development problems. This rook can get into the game, and you know the rooks could be connected. Nevertheless, of course, the two bishops is a long-term advantage for white. I mean, I guess Wesley was hoping that this bishop, when it's blunted by the pawn on f6, doesn't really have the effect that perhaps is, you know, white would like. Nevertheless, that bishop can turn in another direction if it wants to, or even attack down this diagonal. So the bishop pair, you have to love your bishops, is a significant asset in this position. Rook d1. Knight b6 looks sensible to put a rook in the middle. The knight heads to the side and bishop d4. Already tricky decision for black. I mean, I suppose that the natural move here, to my eyes, would be to put the rook on the second rank to guard the second rank. Puts the rook out of trouble. But have a look what happens. I should say that Wesley played rook a5 here, but look what happens after rook c7. Check. Okay, you don't want the king stepping in the middle and then rook e1. So g6 and then f5, this disruptive move. And this breaks through. Let me just show you this variation. It's very nice. Takes, takes. Now, if pawn takes bishop, then rook f6 gets through to the king. So knight d7 protects here. Bishop f2. Just withdrawing the bishop. And after pawn takes, bishop g3 attacks the rook has to move, and then rook takes knight, and that's game over. Lovely switch by this bishop round to g3, and just shows the power of the bishop in combination with the rooks. Actually, rooks and bishops work incredibly well together, as we're going to see. So bishop d4 played, and rook a5, this rook going out on a limb. And here is where, of course, you could make a move like a3, and I think white still has a very pleasant advantage. But at this point, Magnus calculated very well. Not easy to do in a rapid play game when you're short of time, but b4, excellent move. Well, first question to ask is, what happens on rook takes a2? Well, once again, this disruptive check, bishop h5, is incredibly powerful. Yeah, watch this. King e7, bishop c5 is actually checkmate. So g6, f5, takes. There's a problem here. Knight d7, rook d5. Well, it's clear that white is winning material in that position. So after b4, rook takes a2, impossible. So the rook came back into the middle. That got hit. This is really nasty. Now, the only chance is to bring the rook back to d7, but white certainly has the advantage there with those beautiful bishops. But rook b5 was a blunder, because after bishop c5, that rook is trapped, and there's no way back for black in this position. The game went like this: knight a4, bishop e2, hitting the rook. Wesley gave up the exchange, but that was in vain. Knight c3, bishop h5. This check finally came, this disruptive move, very nasty indeed. g6 and rook d3. So basically white is keeping this extra exchange, because if pawn takes, then rook takes knight. There's just a few more tactics to negotiate. Bishop c4, Wesley is fighting hard, but after rook d7, now the rook is safe, and this one is attacked. Rook c1, everything working in white's favour here. Knight e4 attacks the rook. There's still, the tactics continue, but after rook d4, that really is the end of the road. So for example, if pawn takes bishop, rook takes, that is a clear extra exchange, easy win. Or if bishop b5, then let's just withdraw the bishop. Bishop f3, extra exchange, pawns dropping, absolutely hopeless for black. So after rook d4, Wesley resigned, and Magnus Carlsen won the $200,000 first prize. That's not a bad payday. After the game, Carlsen said, "I'm very, very happy with the way the event ended, the very last game, because for me it sort of comes full circle. When we had the first Champions Chess Tour event in 2020, I think that was when I turned 30, I lost to Wesley in the final. That's exactly when this sort of line in the Queen's Gambit that Wesley played today made it just difficult to play d4 at all. It's like the Berlin versus d4. So to actually win the game, like decide the tour by winning a game against Wesley in that line, that's really come full circle for me. So that's really interesting that Carlsen was very proud of finding this interesting little line, bishop d2. But this is what Magnus Carlsen is very good at, finding these little twists in familiar openings that just unsettle the opposition. That's his absolute speciality. Brilliant stuff from Magnus Carlsen. Of course, his technique was superb. But yes, I would highlight again this idea. Clever little idea. Bishop e2 followed by f4. Very tricky indeed. And that pushed Wesley over the edge. So there we go. Over the next few days, I'm going to be looking back at some more games from this Champions Chess Tour final. There was some very interesting stuff going on. So I hope you'll enjoy that. Thanks for watching.